Chương trình này được bảo trợ bởi
Family Joy, tổ ấm y tế của mọi gia đình, 714 898 0765.
Hi, welcome to the OC Health and Education Show on Little Saigon TV. I'm your host, Julie Yip. To us, OC stands for community because we believe that our community is stronger when we come together. Today is March, and this is part of the Women's History Month. And to celebrate that, I have two special guests. That is Dr. Thuy Vo Dang, who is a curator at the UCI Southeast Asian Archive, along with Dr. Elaine Lewinick. Dr. Elaine Lewinick is a professor at Cal State Fullerton and for the American Studies and the coordinator of Environmental Studies. Julie Yip kính chào quý vị khán giả của Little Saigon TV trong chương trình Kiến Thức Y Khoa, Gia Đình và Xã hội. Đây là chương trình OC Health and Education. Chương trình đây là chương trình song ngữ. Julie hy vọng nói về thông tin rất là quan trọng cho cộng đồng Việt Nam của mình. Hôm nay chọn là March, là Women's History Month. Julie hy vọng mình có thời gian nói chuyện với hai người quý khách cho một tháng để dành cho người phụ nữ. Bữa nay đại diện cho phụ nữ của quận Cam đó là Dr. Thuy Vo Dang and Dr. Elaine Lewinick. Thank you so much, ladies, for coming on to the show today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, it's our pleasure.
Well, you know, I know that it's such an important month for us because March is Women's History Month. And, you know, for me, I really wanted to invite both of you on today because I hear there's a book out and it's called, what is it? People's Guide to Orange County. And I think that's a great idea for us to, first of all, showcase both of your contributions to the community, but specifically for your expansive knowledge about Orange County.
We're really excited to talk to you about our book. It's been a labor of love and a collaboration between not just the two of us, but a third co-author named Gustavo Arellano.
Gustavo Arellano. So I think that's a male, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Right. So, you know, for us, when we celebrate women history, it's not about the women that leads in our community, but also the men, the family, the children, and the community that makes us successful. What does women history mean to you, Dr. Lewinick?
Well, our whole book, I brought in the postcard about it. Our book is about the diversity of Orange County's past and present. And so many people think that Orange County is just suburbs, or just conservatives, or just rich housewives, or just Disneyland. And if you actually look at guidebooks to Orange County, that is all they will tell you. It's rare to even see Little Saigon in our guidebooks. The typical guidebooks don't even name Orange County. They will say something like Los Angeles, Disneyland, and San Diego. And so as if Disneyland stands for all that we have to offer. And if you dig into the guidebooks, they'll tell you after Disneyland, maybe you could go to Knott's Berry Farm, or maybe the Costa Mesa Mall, or the beaches, but that's it. They don't tell you about all the different things that have happened here. And people, not just tourists, but locals too, students studying, they don't know all that has happened here. They don't know that Chinese people built the railroads and the irrigation canals that founded Orange County. They don't know that the Ahachiman and the Tongva Nation, the Native American groups, they're still here and reclaiming their lands. They know a little bit about Little Saigon, but not enough. And they don't know Little Arabia and Koreatown and all the wonderful things that we have in this county.
I hear so much enthusiasm in your voice of talking about this book. You know, Dr. Thuy Vo nói thêm về tiếng Việt Nam cho mình hiểu đó là cuốn sách đây là có ý nghĩa gì cho Dr. Thuy.
Cảm ơn Julie. Thúy muốn tóm tắt lại cái ý nghĩa của Elaine. Thì cuốn sách này chúng tôi hợp tác hơn 5 năm, khoảng chừng 6 năm mới có sự kiện của cuốn sách là nghiên cứu về lịch sử của quận Cam. So qua những theo Thúy muốn giải thích là sự social justice history, right? So it's
cái
lịch sử như là help me with the word social justice, là công bằng xã hội, sự công bằng xã hội cho cộng đồng này. Thì mình cũng biết là Orange County có một số người Việt tị nạn và người Việt di dân lớn nhất trong thế giới ở ngoài Việt Nam. Vì vậy thì Thúy, nếu mà những người muốn mua cuốn sách này, mở ra trong chính giữa có một cái section gọi là Central Orange County có rất là nhiều câu chuyện về Little Saigon, về phố Bosa, và những câu chuyện đó nêu lên những điều mà rất là nhiều người không biết về cộng đồng mình. Và những cộng đồng khác. Mình sống gần bên những cộng đồng indigenous, right? Và những người Mễ, và những cộng đồng mà dân tộc thiểu số khác. Mà dân tộc thiểu số tại quận Cam actually nó cao hơn dân tộc Mỹ trắng. Bây giờ là cũng dân tộc Mỹ trắng chỉ có khoảng chừng 40% thôi. Thì những số khác là những người như là mình, người Việt và người Korean, những người Mexican American. Cho nên rất là quan trọng là hợp tác giữa Elaine, Thúy và Gustavo. Chúng tôi qua những ngành khác nhau, Elaine về lịch sử và Thúy về thư viện và văn khố Đông Nam Á. Gustavo là một nhà báo viết cho LA Times. Cho nên về qua những cái interdisciplinary research hoặc là nghiên cứu liên ngành, có thể chia sẻ với cộng đồng của mình những cái câu chuyện rất là đa dạng về Orange County.
I love all the English words that let me follow. Thank you.
We said we would do it in English,
I
right?
know, it's perfect.
Elaine, when we talk about this book, I know Thuy was just mentioning a little bit of background that, the three authors in this book that collaborated, it took you 5 to 6 years to do this. But I love the richness of the background and the contributions of each person. Can you tell me how you guys got together as a team, and why did this teamwork work so well to make sure that this becomes successful?
Yeah. There was already a People's Guide to Los Angeles that had been a book that some brilliant scholars had done, and it took so much different research and put it together in an accessible format. And it's important too that it's a People's Guide. It's not the definitive one. It's open-ended, and it's an invitation to really explore more. And so I ran into one of the authors of A People's Guide to Los Angeles, and I just gushed to her about how great her book was and how much it had inspired my own students in Orange County, who just really wanted to show the full range of what has happened here and the power struggles based on the places around here. And I said, you really need to write a People's Guide to Orange County. We need it even more than the People's Guide to LA. There's not as much scholarship about Orange County.
Because I think outside of, California, when people say, where are you from? I say Orange County. They say, oh, you're from LA.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's one thing is that so many times we almost feel like we're invisible or that we don't exist. And I just love the fact that there is now a People's Guide to Orange County. And specifically, knowing that it's not about just where to go for tourism, but also the richness in the history that made us for where we are today.
We don't have that many books about Orange County, but we have archives, thanks to people like Thuy, who have been collecting community archives. And so when I told Laura Barraclough we needed a People's Guide to Orange County, she said, you're right, we need one, you should write it. But then she said...
So she offered it to you to write it.
She did. It was an honor. But then she said, nobody can write this alone. Because, with historians especially, we specialize in subgroups, we specialize in certain eras, and we wanted this to tell the whole story. And we wanted it to also have recommendations of nearby restaurants and other things to do, because sometimes we're sending people to a vacant parking lot where something important happened. But you still need to enjoy this book for the physical trip to these places. So I needed to have others who brought in other skills. And so I started asking my friends, and my friend Susie Wu said, you've got to find Thuy Vo Dang. Because I needed someone who knew about oral histories, I needed someone who knew about archives, I needed someone who knew about the Southeast Asian experience, and it turns out Thuy is an amazing restaurant reviewer.
Well, I thank you so much, Elaine, for sharing that aspect and bringing it together as such a great team. Now, Dr. Thuy, I know we're going to go to commercial break quickly, but if you can tell me briefly about, what is the importance of having a historian, an archivist, and also a journalist to be part of this team?
Yeah, I think it's so important to have all of these strength areas, right? And that we weren't just friends who got together and decided to do a cool project. We actually hadn't worked together before.
No.
So trước khi chúng tôi hợp tác để viết cuốn sách này, chúng tôi chưa có hợp tác với nhau.
Mà chưa bao giờ gặp nhau.
Chưa bao giờ gặp. Hình như Thúy có quen Elaine lúc trước. qua những cái conferences này kia đó. Nhưng mà Thúy cũng có biết tại vì Gustavo rất là nổi tiếng. Anh ấy lúc trước là người editor của OC Weekly. Anh có rất là nhiều kinh nghiệm và anh rất là quen thuộc những câu chuyện của Orange County. Cho nên mình cũng cần hợp tác với một người như vậy. Chúng tôi gọi cái team này là Dream Team.
Maybe sau phần quảng cáo chúng tôi sẽ vẫn tiếp tục nói chuyện với Dream Team nhé. Julie kính chào quý vị khán giả. Hôm nay là Julie có thời gian nói chuyện với Dr. Thuy, với Dr. Elaine. Sau phần quảng cáo chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục nói chuyện với two of the Dream Team hôm nay. Cảm ơn quý vị khán giả của Little Saigon TV.
Chương trình này được bảo trợ bởi
Family Joy, tổ ấm y tế của mọi gia đình, 714 898 0765.
Hi, welcome back to the OC Health and Education Show on Little Saigon TV. I'm your host, Julie Yip. On our show today, we have Dr. Thuy Vo Dang, the curator for the Southeast Asian Archive, and also Dr. Elaine Lewinick, who is the professor over at the American Studies and a coordinator of the Environmental Studies at Cal State Fullerton. Thank you so much, ladies, for coming today and to highlight the importance of March, which is Women History Month. Just before the commercial break, we both have we had a great opportunity to learn more about your work and the book that you've collaborated with Gustav. And I want to learn more about the importance of what this project means to you. But if Dr. Thuy Vo, if you can just kind of explain to us and kind of reiterate what Elaine mentioned about having the importance of bringing the Dream Team together, having a historian, an archivist, and a journalist.
Yeah, of course. And I will also say that, and to address the audience for this, I'm trying my best to be bilingual. It is a different part of your brain at work, right? Earlier, lúc hồi nãy thì Elaine có chia sẻ là chúng tôi, Thúy và Gustavo và Elaine đến với nhau và hợp tác để nghiên cứu cho cuốn sách này. Tại vì chúng tôi qua những ngành rất là khác nhau. Elaine thì là một người giáo sư dạy về môn lịch sử, về American Studies. Và cô ấy có rất là nhiều sinh viên tại Cal State Fullerton. Họ là những người mà có gia đình đang sống tại quận Cam, tại Orange County. Và Thúy theo ngành thư viện và văn khố, Libraries and Archives. Và Gustavo là một người một nhà báo, phải không? Lúc trước anh là editor cho OC Weekly và có rất là nhiều kinh nghiệm và kiến thức và viết rất là nhiều sách về Orange County. Thì qua hợp tác này chúng tôi có thể cũng như là giúp nhau để thấu hiểu thêm một cái lịch sử mà rất là nhiều người ở trong và ở ngoài Orange County chưa có biết. Những cái tiếng nói ở trong cộng đồng của mình mà trong những cái cuốn sách lịch sử chưa có. Cho nên rất là quan trọng. Thúy gọi là social justice history, cũng như là những vấn đề, những sự công bằng xã hội. Và những tiếng nói của những người như là phụ nữ đó. Nhiều khi mình thấy nhà văn viết về lịch sử, nhiều khi họ bỏ ra hoặc là họ không có nêu lên những tiếng nói của phụ nữ trong cộng đồng. Elaine sẽ có thêm những câu chuyện về những cái câu chuyện ở trong cuốn sách mà về tiếng nói của phụ nữ, Women's History in our book. So I don't know if you want to pass it over so she can share.
But I also wanted to say that I think there were ways we complemented each other. Like I was visiting Thuy in her office, and she has these amazing file cabinets at UCI, and one of them is labeled manicurist. and so I said, well, I have always wondered, why are there so many Vietnamese American manicurists? Yes. And you have a file folder on this. What's in it? And so there were ways that we hadn't planned to do something in the book about Vietnamese American manicurists, but because I saw that in your office and asked the question that I'd been wondering for a while, you knew the answer. You thought it was obvious. But so many people don't. Yes. And so we got to pull out each other's stories and the things that we know, so that it's in one book where lots of people with lots of different backgrounds can dip into the book and find things. And our book is, figuring out what are the stories of Little Saigon to tell. And, we tell the story of the Little Saigon signs that were vandalized in the 80s by people who didn't want Little Saigon to thrive. And that was a story you knew, but my archival skills helped document like exactly what was the vandalism and what was Caltrans' response, and together we helped really fill out the story, and it was great to do that together.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to say that we emphasize is we don't want to tell a story about victimization. And Orange County, it has had a fraught history, but we wanted to tell stories about resistance and endurance. So one of the stories I'm really proud of is the story that we call Asian Mug Book Resistance. And that this audience may already know it, but I didn't. I didn't know that here in Little Saigon in the 90s, Asian teenagers hanging out would get stopped by the police and photographed and have their things looked through. And there were teenagers who were just hanging out near where we are now who said this isn't right, and the cops harassed them and thought because they were wearing big baggy clothes and were teenagers and were Asian that they must be gangsters. And I moved to Orange County after that period. I didn't know about this time and the ways that Asian teenagers organized and sued, and the thing they really wanted was an apology from the cops, and they got it, and they got a whole change in policy. And
I really appreciate the fact that this book is not just a guide of just what we typically think of as a tourist guide, but it's a guide with a history for you to hear all the story and the perspective. Dr. Thuy-Vo, can you explain to us one more time what Elaine was mentioning about the importance of having all the different types of story and perspective and experiences that includes Vietnamese Americans, that includes Little Saigon, because as you mentioned before, that many times books that were written may or may not include Orange County, and oftentimes, didn't amplify the voices of women, minorities, and even, young Vietnamese Americans.
Young people, yeah, and actually the story that Elaine mentioned features very prominently Vietnamese young women. It was young women who pushed back and got the apology from the police, and they had the support of the ACLU, and after all of this activism, right? So sự vận động, this activism led to some change. I don't know that many people in our community even know about the social activism that our young people were involved with. And that continues. It's not something that was stuck in the 90s, right? I think the issues have changed. We can all probably remember that era when our parents might have been worried about, gangsters.
Us joining gangs.
Yes, that was a very big deal in our community. Well, in fact, many young people were just đi quán cà phê, đi chơi, right, hanging out karaoke with their friends, and they would get profiled as gangsters. So
there's actually a kind of funny, but not a really funny story. But my brother, there are two of them. They went in this truck. They were driving a group in Monterey Park, and they're not even gangsters at all. They're just really nerdy Asian boys. But they got pulled over, and they got handcuffed, sat on the curb, and the cop asked my eldest brother, Sam, "Where are you from?" He says, "Vietnam." Not because the cop was asking, "What gang are you from?" that question. So when he came home and told us that, we thought it was kind of funny, but that is that racial profile. That these two innocent, really nerdy men or boys were asked what gang they're from. And I really like the fact that this book is really telling the stories of our experience growing up in this area, but also to highlight, kind of the journey. So Dr. Thuy-Vo, if you can say it in Vietnamese, so then the audience can also understand, because, we have this bilingual audience. And I'm hoping that this show will help bridge that generational divide. For our kids who, are Vietnamese Americans, and, they're still Vietnamese, but oftentimes, sometimes our kids don't speak the language. So I hope this show can continue to introduce and invite them to discover more about their heritage and, our upbringing.
Yeah, well, I'm going to introduce a term actually that many young folks might not know from that era, which is bội đời, right? Bội đời was a term that was used to describe gangsters in our own community. And it literally means dust of life. But this is we really need to historically contextualize that term. So that term came out of the unaccompanied minors that came here after the Vietnam American War. So sau cuộc chiến tranh Mỹ Việt thì rất là nhiều trẻ em đến Hoa Kỳ và họ không có phụ huynh và họ không có gia đình. Thì trong thời gian đó có rất là nhiều trẻ em cũng như họ phải theo băng đảng là một lý do, nhưng mà theo Thúy thấy là rất là nhiều tuổi trẻ họ cần một cái nơi để họ có thể có cái sense of belonging, có một cộng đồng.
Dạ vâng.
Thì vào thập niên 80-90 thì mình thấy có rất là nhiều băng đảng và rất là nhiều crimes in our community. Nhưng mà lúc đó là cũng là một thời gian mà cảnh sát và những người civic leaders, họ không có thấu hiểu lịch sử của mình. Cho nên những cái vấn đề như là racial profiling rất là nguy hiểm. Cho nên một cái câu chuyện mà Lane mới chia sẻ là một cái câu chuyện về hai em gốc Việt. Họ là sinh viên ở tại Tustin High School, và họ đang đi chơi với nhau ở ngoài một cái quán cà phê. Họ đến payphone và họ đang gọi cha mẹ hoặc là người nào đó để đón họ, và họ bị cảnh sát kiểm tra và chụp hình của họ và để hình ảnh đó ở tại cái police station. Rồi về sau đó họ biết như vậy, cho nên một em đó có những luật sư và ACLU đó để có thể hỗ trợ, và họ kiện cảnh sát và thắng. Cho nên theo đó thì Thúy muốn nhắm mạnh vào sức mạnh của cộng đồng, khi mà mình thấu hiểu cái lịch sử.
Cộng đồng mà sức mạnh của mấy trẻ em nữa.
Đúng rồi, trẻ em và phụ nữ.
Và phụ nữ nữa. Mà sau phòng quảng cáo, Julie sẽ tiếp tục nói thêm về cái chương trình hôm nay rất là đặc biệt. Cảm ơn Dr. Elaine and Dr. Thuy đã lên đài hôm nay. Julie cảm ơn quý vị khán giả của Little Saigon TV đã theo dõi chương trình Kiến thức Y Khoa Gia Đình và Xã hội. Sau phòng quảng cáo, chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục nói chuyện về cái chuyện rất là quan trọng về cái People's Guide to Orange County. Cảm ơn quý vị khán giả của Little Saigon TV.
Chương trình này được bảo trợ bởi
Family Joy, tổ ấm y tế của mọi gia đình, 714 898 0765.
Hi, welcome back to the OC Health and Education Show on Little Saigon TV. I'm your host, Julie Yip. Today, we have a great opportunity to talk to Dr. Thuy Vo Dang from UCI and Dr. Elaine Lewinick. We're here to talk about, to highlight the importance of March Women's History Month and to learn more about how they were able to get this book together and do so much research in the 5-6 years to get this book together, and also to continue to do so much to contribute to our community. So Elaine, I want to start with you. I know that you are not just an author of this book. You're also a mother, a wife, I'm sure, and all the other titles at home that is even more important. Tell me, how were you able to do this with that part of your life?
I mean, my poor kids got dragged along on some research trips. And my kids actually would tell me when we were on long car drives, they would say, Mom, tell me what happened here. It makes the drive more interesting.
Wow.
So they recognized this skill I have to know what happened at different places. And I could say, oh, well, near here, all sorts of interesting things happened. And just knowing where the nearest lynching tree is a thing I think people should know. And so they were supportive mostly, but I also think that the experience of working and writing this book while also raising children made me more attentive to the stories about schooling and childcare. And there's a bunch of them. Near here in Stanton, there was a 5-year-old who his mother kept him home sick from school, and another parent was worried because she hadn't seen this child or the mother. Yes. The mother had left him alone though, because she had to go to work and she was a single mom. Wow. So he was home alone, and the cops came just to do a check, and he was sitting in, they had just moved in, they didn't have a lot of furniture. So the cops came in and thought they'd been robbed because there wasn't a lot in this small apartment. And the kid was watching TV, and it was a cowboy show, and he had a little plastic gun, and he was sitting home alone with his little plastic gun, and here comes a big cop in, and so he pointed the gun at the cop, and the cop reacted and killed him.
Wow.
And there was a big uproar about it. This was the early 80s. The lawyer who defended the mother actually also then worked to make sure that now we have in the tax code there's deductions if workers offer childcare. There was this deep need for childcare. And I think that if we hadn't been mothers writing this book, we might not have noticed those stories as much and noticed how often there are stories around schools and stories around that need for better childcare. and stories that changed the county.
And it's not just the retelling of the facts, right? It's actually the way that the insights and perspectives that we learn, the analysis, right, of how to read an event in history like that. I think you could have just read it as, oh, here's this police shooting, period. But then linking it to childcare, linking it to that need in the Orange County community, also making it local and relevant.
Yes,
right?
Yes. So how important it is for you to be a mother writing this book, Dr. Thuy Go Đen?
I think, you know, I don't separate out the different identities, the different hats that I wear, so to speak. So Thúy có 3 đứa con.
Dạ vâng.
Họ 5 tuổi, 11 tuổi, 15 tuổi. Thì trong thời gian mà Thúy làm nghiên cứu cho cuốn sách này thì rất là nhiều lần Thúy cũng giống như là Elaine, Thúy mang họ theo, hoặc là Thúy chia sẻ những câu chuyện với họ. Cũng giống như là câu chuyện Elaine mới nói, rất là buồn và rất là khó nghe cho cho những đứa trẻ, nhưng mà mình phải tìm những phương pháp để có thể chia sẻ những câu chuyện buồn hoặc xấu về một cái đề tài nào đó để cho có thể how do I explain that, to have like for it to resonate with different groups, right? So Thúy nghĩ là tại vì chúng tôi là những người mẹ và phục vụ cho cộng đồng đó, thì lúc nào mình cũng nghĩ là cuốn sách này không phải cho những nhà nghiên cứu hoặc là những người ở trong đại học, mà chúng tôi rất là muốn cộng đồng rất là lớn rộng có thể đọc và có thể hiểu và muốn tìm hiểu thêm sau khi họ đọc những câu chuyện ở trong cuốn sách này.
Tại Julie thấy đó là rất nhiều phụ nữ đó là phải có nhiều công việc ở nhà với việc ở ngoài thì rất khó khăn để cho mình có cái balance đó. Thì you know, I just mentioning that, you know, a lot of us as females, we have so many jobs. We have our job at home and a job within our profession or even within the community, and that balance is oftentimes so difficult. But what I hear from both of you, and what I recognize, is that you're able to have that balance by including your children, but making it, more importantly, a teaching moment. A teachable moment that you take them with you. And for me, when I hear you talk about this book, I'm learning so much, because when I heard, you know, people's guide to Orange County, I'm like, maybe I can find all these great places to go eat
and you can
do all this. But I think in addition to that, you're giving us historic context on where it came from and why it was important, and also just the offer of, you know, childcare and the importance of childcare, and just within, you know, the stories within the community. I think that's so important. So in addition to the historic context, there are other guides to foodies and places to eat, because I heard that you're pretty much a foodie too.
Well, we all contributed our restaurant recommendations and sites of interest. So we might send you, like Elaine said, to an empty parking lot to understand, like, that what happened here, for instance, the burning down of Chinatown in Santa Ana, right? But you can go nearby and actually visit a cultural center or a community services organization, or get a really good burrito, you know, at a food truck.
Yes. It's arranged geographically, and so and that's really neat, because it means you put these stories together, you know, that it's the story of Garden Grove is the story of Little Saigon, but it's also the story, there were LGBTQ bars here in the 50s and 60s. The oldest lesbian bar in America is in Garden Grove. And, you know, those different stories that don't necessarily get told on the same page or by the same people, they're together, they're on the same street. And so you can see those things together and then go to a good restaurant. And to get back to the child stuff, it was important to us that we write in a way that even children could read. And so we asked friends of ours who are high school teachers to try out drafts of this with their classes. And our friends did so well with that. We thought they were just going to do an experiment in what academics call peer review, you know, and ask for feedback. They gave us feedback, but they also created a lot of different ways for teachers to engage with the book. And so we made that into an appendix of lesson plan ideas. The way some books have book club reading suggestions, our book has lesson plan ideas, because we really hope that it will be used in a whole bunch of different grade levels. That I think that also comes from us having children in the schools and caring about that.
I just love the richness of both of your backgrounds and what you bring to the table, because you're coming as a mother, as a historian, and as archivist, but also as a foodie, because then you're bringing this together. And so I really appreciate you, and I recognize, all the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into this project, and I hope to put my hands on this soon. How can our audience get a hold of this book, and is there an event coming up?
Oh, yes. So, of course, we recommend getting the book from UC Press, and we can share the discount code with your audience.
Okay.
But we will be at Alta Baja Market in Santa Ana this Saturday from 1 p.m. onwards to do a reading and a signing. All three of us will be there.
So that's March 26th, is that correct?
Yes, March 26th, Saturday, 1 p.m.
And we're very lucky in Orange County that we have a few independent bookstores. Not every place has that. And so at our signing, there will be Libromobile, which is an independent Latinx-owned bookstore, and they'll be there to sell books. So if you can't buy it from UC Press, you can buy it from Libromobile. You can get it from the libraries, too. You can get it anywhere where you get books.
Yeah, it's on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, it's everywhere.
But I think that the book signing would be a great opportunity for everybody to meet you both, and also Gustavo.
Yes,
right?
He will be there.
So thank you so much. Julie, cảm ơn quý vị. Hôm nay Julie có thời gian nói chuyện với Dr. Thuy Vô Trang and Dr. Elaine Lewinick về cuốn sách đó là People's Guide to Orange County. Hôm nay Julie học hiểu rất nhiều. Julie tưởng đâu là People's Guide là một cuốn sách để cho mình biết chỗ nào mình đi ăn uống, hay mình nhậu, hay mình thấy cho vui. Mà thiệt ra hôm nay Julie học hiểu đó là cuốn sách đây là có rất nhiều cái content về cái ý nghĩa, về cái lịch sử của quận Cam. Sau phần quảng cáo, chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục nói thêm với Dr. Thuy Vô Trang, với Dr. Elaine Lewinick về cái People's Guide to Orange County. Cảm ơn quý vị khán giả của Little Saigon TV.
Chương trình này được bảo trợ bởi
Family Joy, tổ ấm y tế của mọi gia đình, 714 898 0765.
Hi, welcome back to the OC Health and Education Show on Little Saigon TV. I'm your host, Julie Yip. Today we're able to have two great guests to talk about the People's Guide to Orange County and also to highlight the importance of March Women History Month. We know that as women, there's so many responsibilities that we have at home and within our profession and our community. But today we have Dr. Thuy Vô Trang and Dr. Elaine Lewinick to talk about that great balance of home and life and work and also to enjoy the community. You have been able to teach me so much about this book. It's not just a regular guide. It is so much more meaningful and impactful. So I've learned that this book would be a history book for me, and it's a book for something that I can use to teach my kids as teenagers. Sometimes they just want a good boba. They want to go to a good restaurant, but they might need to know, the history behind this location or there's just this area. What does this book mean to you, Dr. Thuy Vô Trang? What are you hoping to accomplish from getting this book out there and to meeting the community?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I just want to emphasize how much I've learned from working with Elaine, and I want to share that something that she's always said when we've spoken together is that once you learn about something that has happened in a place, right, you're changed. You can't, not know anymore. And so that boba shop that might sit on land where there has been struggle, but there has been triumph and change, and people have pushed for rights, right?
Yes.
All of these stories that have occurred on the place that you go to every day and you may not even know it. I think there's so many instances of that in Orange County where not just our community, but all the different communities that live side by side could really start to value and appreciate, right, the communities they're a part of more. So my hope, I'll transition to Vietnamese. Hy vọng của Thúy cho không những cho cuốn sách này, nhưng mà cho những công việc mà Thúy làm qua VALA và Hội Văn học Nghệ thuật Việt Mỹ VALA. Thúy là I'm a board member and Arts Orange County. Là mình có thể tạo ra những cơ hội để cho cộng đồng giống như cộng đồng của chúng ta có thể có sức mạnh, có thể có câu chuyện lịch sử, câu chuyện của hiện tại, nó robust, complex, nó không có phải là những câu chuyện mà lúc nào cũng quay về chiến tranh hoặc là những cách mà cộng đồng của mình đã bị stereotyped, right? Thì lúc nào Thúy cũng hy vọng là mình có cơ hội để có thể tham gia vào những cái projects mà có thể nêu lên tiếng nói của cộng đồng của mình.
Yeah, cảm ơn. Dr. Elaine, the same question to you is, what does this book mean to you, and what are you hoping to accomplish? Because I'm so excited to introduce this to the community and also to make sure that they have opportunity to meet you.
We have this phrase in our introduction that's quoting a theorist who says there's stories that sleep in the streets. And I think about that because we have people who sleep in the streets, you know, and so the stories that sleep in the streets, they're there in the places. There's the nuclear weapons that are buried under parks in Orange County. The fact that we used to have Chinatowns in Anaheim and Santa Ana that were deliberately destroyed. All those different stories that have happened here, they help answer questions that I think a lot of people have. Why don't we have more affordable housing here? There's all sorts of different questions. I feel like it makes it better when you know the stories that sleep in the streets. It makes you more a part of this place. And I'm the only white author, and I'm the one most often mistaken for the one who's been here longest, but I'm the one who's been here shortest. And I want to correct that. I want people to know that Gustavo, some of his family are recent immigrants, but some are not. And Thuy, who came here before me, people should know those stories. They shouldn't think that my co-authors are the new ones. We need to know how long we have been diverse. Not always in a way like it's a small world after all. It's not always been that happy Disney ride.
Yes.
It's been sometimes a struggle and a negotiation, and we can learn from that. And so knowing the diversity of our past helps us navigate the diversity of our present, and I think that's incredibly important.
So tell me that quote again about sleeping in the street.
Awaken the stories that sleep in the streets.
Awaken the stories that sleep in the street. That's so important because, you know, so many times I think when you walk by someone who is unhoused, who is homeless, sometimes it's just important just to say hi and just to take the time to even acknowledge their presence, but acknowledge their story. There's so many times when, you know, when my kids were young, I would, you know, ask the person, can I buy you something? What would you like from this restaurant? Instead of just buying something and just giving it to them, you know. So I think that's what it reminds me of, is that you're making this a book that allows the people who may not have a voice, or maybe these stories have been buried in our history, to amplify that and to say, you know, we can celebrate some of these harsh times, but also to see how far we've come along the way. Dr. Thuy, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there a message you have to address straight to the audience and tell them a little bit about your book signing?
Thank you. Yes, so our book signing is on Saturday, March 26th from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. All three of us, Elaine, Gustavo, and I will be there. So please come and join us. Libro Mobile is an independent bookstore in the city of Santa Ana. Their location is at the Bristol Swap Mall. So you can always go there and find our books there, but they will be selling books at the Alta Baja Market on 4th Street in Santa Ana.
And right now, downtown Santa Ana, it's actually a little bit hard to navigate. They're tearing up the streets to put in a trolley, and there's a lot of questions about how to redesign Santa Ana and for whom it is being redesigned.
Yes.
So it'll be a bit of a challenge to reach downtown Santa Ana to Alta Baja Market. But we want to support downtown Santa Ana's businesses, which have just come through COVID and now are dealing with this great disruption of the streets torn up. So we hope people will navigate those torn up streets and find us at Alta Baja Market. And Alta Baja is Spanish for higher and lower, which were the names of the different parts of California when it was all part of Mexico. And so we want to honor that part of our past too.
You know, and I think, you know, when you mentioned about Santa Ana, I think a lot of people don't realize that Santa Ana is also still part of Little Saigon. Because so many times when we talk about, you know, Little Saigon, we're just thinking Westminster, Garden Grove, maybe Fountain Valley. But many times people forget that Santa Ana has a richness and even a contribution in being a part of the Little Saigon, what we call Little Saigon, but also highlighting the history of the API community. Within that, as you mentioned earlier, that, you know, sometimes it got buried with everything that has happened. But I really thank you both for being on the show, for sharing with us this great opportunity to read about the book, to meet you at some book signing event. Julie cảm ơn quý vị khán giả của Little Saigon TV. Hôm nay Julie có thời gian nói chuyện với Dr. Thuy Vo Dang of UCI, là cái người curator of the Southeast Asian American Archive. Thêm nữa đó là Dr. Elaine Lewinick. Elaine Lewinick là một người professor của UC, của Cal State Fullerton. Hôm nay hai quý vị đây nói cái việc rất quan trọng cho quận Cam của mình đó là hiểu thêm về quyển sách về cái lịch sử của quận Cam với quyển sách là People's Guide to Orange County. Nếu quý vị có thời gian thứ Bảy tuần này, đó là ngày 26 tháng 3, có một cái book signing. Nếu quý vị có thời gian tới tham dự chương trình đây, được gặp Dr. Thuy Đan với Dr. Elaine, mà thêm nữa có Gustavo Arellano. Hôm nay đó là Julie muốn có để dành thời gian nói về tháng 3, đó là một tháng để dành cho phụ nữ, mà thêm nữa là mình phải xác nhận cái mỗi người phụ nữ mà giúp cho cộng đồng của mình, mà thêm nữa là mỗi người, mỗi đàn ông, mỗi đứa con, mỗi gia đình, một cộng đồng của mình, làm cho một phụ nữ đây có rất nhiều thành công. Một lần nữa, nếu quý vị có thời gian thứ Bảy ngày 26 tháng 3 lúc 1 giờ tới 3 giờ at Alta Baja Market, đó là in thành phố Santa Ana. Julie hy vọng gặp quý vị cuối tuần này. Julie sẽ tới tham dự. Hy vọng Julie cũng kêu hai đứa con của Julie tới tham dự luôn. You know, Elaine, I'm hoping that I can drag my kids along, because I know, you know, with children, it is a little bit of a drag in the beginning, but I know once they get there, they're gonna enjoy maybe not just the food in the area, but also, you know, to eventually pick up this book more willingly, because this weekend mom's going to make them go.
Excellent.
But I'm hoping that, you know, when they have this book in their home, that one day they'll open it up, and one day they'll be more curious about, you know, these major landmarks that many of us may just see it as a parking lot, or maybe just as a tree, as you mentioned, that there's a lynching tree in Orange County, or maybe that they can stop by, you know, the most historic lesbian bar in the community, right? And I'm learning that, wow, there's so much history that I drive by and I don't get to recognize. So I want to thank you both for being on the show. If there are any last words or for the audience?
If you can't make it to our book signing, you can also follow us on social media. On Instagram, we are at PG, like People's Guide, and then the number 2, and OC. PG2OC. And Twee's going to be at one of the libraries on Friday, and we have a whole bunch more events coming up in May and June.
Yeah, that would be the place to follow us. So you can get, you can kind of follow along the public events that we're going to appear at in the next few months. And I'm just excited to get feedback from people as they read the book and perhaps have more ideas about sites that can be covered.
Well, I'm just hoping that you would have a children's guide, or maybe a guide for even my disability community that I work with. Because oftentimes, you know, like for me, I just joke about it that my attention span is kind of like a Dr. Seuss level. But I'm hoping that, you know, this can also give people opportunities to access information. I might look that I'm capable of reading a book, but oftentimes I actually need special ed accommodation. So I do text to speech. You know, and I think that's important for us, that we can expand our horizon and even expand our reach. So I thank you both for all your contributions, and, you know, continue to celebrate women's history every day.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Little Saigon TV.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Julie and Little Saigon TV and the audience.
Julie cảm ơn quý vị khán giả của Little Saigon TV. Julie hy vọng quý vị có thời gian tham dự cái chương trình đó là thứ Bảy tuần này, ngày 26 tháng 3 at Alta Baja Market ở trong thành phố Santa Ana lúc 1 giờ tới 3 giờ. Julie luôn luôn cảm ơn quý vị khán giả của Little Saigon TV và luôn luôn ủng hộ chương trình Kiến Thức Y Khoa, Gia Đình và Xã Hội. Cảm ơn quý vị khán giả.